Okay, before you say it, I forgot Towards the Unknown and The Right Stuff. I don't know how I overlooked those two. So the video you're about to watch, and this was actually taped afterwards, maybe it's because I knew for the most part that was all models. And I still haven't been able to find a copy of Towards the Unknown. And everybody talks, and that used real airplanes. That's supposed to have some of the greatest footage out there. It's not on YouTube except for a few little snippets, and everybody swears it's one of probably the greatest X-plane movie ever made. I don't know. So apologies, no offense intended. So now we'll go on with what I actually have on the list. I'm just putting the apology on the front of this one. Blonde. Well, good morning, Blue Troopers, or good afternoon, whenever you're seeing this. Hope everybody's doing well. Want to thank everyone who made the live stream. Hope you had a good time. Went long, kind of on purpose, but had a great time. Unfortunately, I realized that we weren't really able to, kind of lost track of the comment thread. There were some sub-threads on there that I felt were worth chatting about. One of them was some folks were asking about my favorite flying movies. And so I took this morning some time to put together a list of some of the best and worst aviation movies out there, which is written on TWA hotel paper. And now the best movies are going to go more of a historical chronological order when they take place. This isn't like a rating of this is the best and this is the bottom of the best. It's just, I thought it'd be an easier way to present them. And then we'll go over some of the worst movies and a couple honorable mentions. So one of my, I believe I think there's 10 on here, 1, 2, 3, 13. So I have 13 of what I think are some of the best aviation movies ever made, and that's not knocking other ones that didn't make the list. There were a lot that I considered, but for one reason or another said, So we can talk about them in more detail another time if you like, but here we go. Those magnificent men and their flying machines, which of course takes place in the earliest days of aviation, about the race from England to, or actually it was, I forget which way they were going. They're going Europe to England or England to Europe. I think they were landing in England. Anyway, point being that they used replicas of a lot of the vintage airplanes with as little modification as possible. Of course, this is before the days of CGI, so it's still real aircraft. Great footage, great acting. It's a comedy, and it works on so many levels. And so that would be going chronologically in the time in history to take place. My first of, I think, one of the greatest flying movies ever made. Then, of course, we have the Blue Max, which takes place not that many years after in history when the race took place. And, of course, it's the First World War. And it's the only World War I flying movie that's on this list. And, yes, there are movies like Howard Hughes' Hell's Angels and some others that probably should be on here. But for other reasons, the Blue Max was just, I think it was my dad's favorite flying movie. And they were doing a lot of novel stuff at the time. They made a lot of replicas of the real airplanes, and they did such a good job that a lot of them were reused in later movies. And then following the Barnstormer era, one of my, I think, a movie I still will rewatch if I see it today, The Great Waldo Pepper with Robert Redford, about barnstorming after the First World War. And that movie also works on so many levels, to include showing some of the dangers involved, as Susan Sarandon's character found out. But there are also a lot of great movies of this era, like Blaze of Noon and some of the others that could make the list. But to me, that one, there was just something about the production quality of the storyline. It's just a movie that made you want to jump in at Jenny and go fly around the American Midwest giving rides. Speaking of which, I don't want to commit to this, but I have those two Jennies that I haven't built yet. They were gifted by Blue Troopers. The one from Glencoe and the one from Atlantis, and maybe wouldn't be a bad idea to put one of those in the Waldo Pepper markings. That'd be pretty cool. Then another one that takes place in the interwar period is Ceiling Zero with Jimmy Cagney, which is there's really not all that much flying in it. A lot of its models work, but it did an intelligent job of talking about the early days of instrument flying. And it's Hollywooded up, but I saw it and I was like, this isn't a bad telling, dealing with ice and instrument flying and all that other stuff. And I don't know, it was just something about the movie I just liked. And even though it doesn't have like the greatest flying sequences, although you will see some interesting aircraft in it. And there have been other movies about that era that made also, again, that you could put on the list, but that's the one that I chose. And in that same time period, of course, would be The Spirit of St. Louis with Jimmy Stewart. In fact, several of these are Jimmy Stewart movies, no shock. He was an active pilot, an Air Force pilot, and a brigadier general in the Air Force Reserve who did fly combat missions over Europe, I believe in a B-24. But anyway, Spirit of St. Louis, most of you guys have probably seen it. What needs to be said, it's just a really good, even though he was really too old for the role, he actually had to politic to get that role, because it won't, Slim, Jimmy, Slim was what they called Lindbergh, but like, you're too old. Lindbergh was much younger. I still want the role, and Jimmy Stewart, so, and it worked. He made it work. Then, of course, one of the greatest flying movies ever made, definitely belongs in any top 10 list, The Battle of Britain. I've actually done a video on the making of the original Battle of Britain movie and what went into it, and you could not pull that off today. I don't think the planes aren't around anymore. Maybe you could, but you see, one of the things I love about these is almost all these movies, all but one, predate CGI, so they were real airplanes. And of course, another Battle of Britain movie that a lot of people haven't seen or heard of, kind of a quote-unquote small film that was really well done, was Dark Blue World, about the Czech pilots flying, I believe they're Czechs, flying for the Royal Air Force. And it deals with the fall of their country, their escape, and everything. It's just, the kid wants to steal the biplane and flee to England, but his instructor's like, don't even think about it, it's a foggy day, you won't get 5 miles before you crash into a hill. So it's the whole thing, it's sort of partly a little bit of a coming-of-age story. A lot of these, like, it has the romantic triangle that you expect in a lot of movies, but the flying scenes were great. I remember reading an article about them making the movie, and they were talking about how the Spitfires were so expensive to operate that they had to minimize the number of scenes, so they rehashed some Battle of Britain footage, but still a great movie, and worth watching. That's where I learned the British phrase, slowly catches the monkey. Then, of course, Tora, Tora, Tora. It's on par with the Battle of Britain. Between Tora, Tora, Tora and the Battle of Britain, it's hard to pick which one, because they were both made on a massive scale using 30, 40, 50 vintage aircraft, and I mean virtual real, both of them created virtually real air forces, and it's the only time, to my knowledge, that Hollywood airplanes got permission from the Navy to actually fly off of a real carrier. They both faced the same challenge with the uphill battle of there were virtually no real enemy aircraft left. So they had to fabricate them. Battle of Britain, they used Spanish aircraft that were made under a license with different engines. Their Bouchons and their Spanish Hankels, so to speak, which really looked the part. A lot of us are like, well, we know that's wrong, it's got the wrong engine on it, but what are you going to do? And in the case of Tora, 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 they had to make the airplanes by modifying American trainers, and they did some impressive stuff, cutting T-6s and BT-13s in half and mating them together to make the Cape torpedo planes, and modifying BT-13s to be the Validai bombers and S&J AT-6s to be the Zeros. And they used, I believe it was Frank Tallman's 2 flying P-40s for the American part. And it's just a great movie. I'm really impressed with what they accomplished. Then following and that was really topped my list for the World War II stuff. You move on to Korea. The Bridges of Toko-ri, I think, is an outstanding flying movie, and probably the best anti-war film ever made. What happens at the end with 3 of Hollywood's favorite actors, William Holden, Mickey Rooney, and Earl Holliman. And if you can watch that movie without crying, you're a better man than I, because I remember seeing that as a kid, and I saw the end, I was like, huh? But the flying scenes are great. The Navy helped them with it. I believe it was the USS Oriskany they used. That film could be great footage, but it can be a little hard to watch, because you know what's going to happen at the end. It's a war. Cold War, the best Cold War flying movie in my humble opinion. Of course, Strategic Air Command, again with Jimmy Stewart. Also, Flight of the Phoenix, also with Jimmy Stewart. Not so much a flying movie, it's more of a movie of survival, but that contraption they built at the end to fly, which many of you know Paul Mantz was actually killed flying. That footage is out there on YouTube if you want to see it. I'm not going to show it here. The original 1970 movie Airport from a novel, although it doesn't have great flying scenes, it was true enough, and given that I'm an airline pilot, I can really relate to it. So I'm going to put that on the list. And the new Top Gun movie, one of my favorites. I mean, I know that it's got some CGI and stuff in it. I get it, and I know all the criticism of the movie, but still, you get your popcorn and you just enjoy it. Tom Cruise did a great job. Everybody did a great job. The flying was fantastic, both the real and the fake, and it was just fun. You know, it's the kind of thing you watch over and over again and don't get tired of. And I want to give an honorable mention to a movie, a little indie film that a lot of people aren't familiar with David Carradine, called Cloud Dancer. And it's a ludicrous plot, but a fun movie, a lot of great aerobatic flying. It's about an aerobatic pilot who makes a living going to air shows, which I don't even know if you can actually do that. But, and it gets into some pretty ludicrous stuff about how these stunt pilots are trying to, some of them are hurting for money, so they try to smuggle drugs, but some nut job in a P-51's hunting them down. I mean, you're like, you gotta be kidding. But it's just great aerial footage. So you're like, you know, you're just watching that one for the flying scenes. Worst movies about flying ever made. I don't think anybody will be shocked to learn that Con Air makes the list. And the thing about Con Air is it's a fun movie. It's a bubblegum flick. It's Nick Cage. I'm not saying don't watch it. It's fun to watch. But from a flying standpoint, it's ridiculous. And the worst part about it is where the Cobras chase the plane down. I'm like, look, I get it. A C-123 isn't the fastest plane around, but it can sure outrun a helicopter. And the Cobra's chasing it down. And like, clearly these people don't have any idea about how aerial intercepts work. You know, oh, we know they're there, and you know, we'll dispatch these choppers to go get them. I'm kind of like, and how are they supposed to catch up with an airplane that's faster than they are? None of this makes any sense. It was just stupid. And the whole, if you've seen the movie, you know what I'm talking about. But it's not the kind of movie you take seriously. It's meant just to be an action thriller, so it sort of gets a pass. Just from an aviation point of view, it's total BS. Starflight 1, I get it, made for TV movie. I mean, when Lee Majors is the lead. And don't get me wrong, I like Lee Majors. I grew up watching The $6 Million Man, you know, Steve Austin. But, you know, we're not talking about War and Peace here. And for those who don't know, it's a hypersonic airliner that accidentally goes into orbit. And the most ludicrous part about that is they start sending the space shuttle up on rescue missions. That clearly folks don't have a clue how orbital dynamics work. But the most ludicrous thing was the shuttle has set a world record doing, you know, multiple flights with only 8 hours or 4 hours between missions. I'm like, aha! Aha! That has entered in the realm of fantasy. Probably the worst real movie made about flying, which ironically is another airport movie. Airport 79, The Concorde, also releases Airport 80, The Concorde. This movie's so bad that even on Rotten Tomatoes, the thing couldn't crack 20 with the audience. I mean, this is the one I was talking about in the live stream where, you know, the big missile that's chased out, the super smart missile, it's a bloody Estes model rocket. You know, that was bad. And an honorable mention goes to, I think it made for TV movie called, was it Final Descent? And yes, let's have a helicopter shoot some holes in the tail so we can get the nose down. No, we'll transfer water, we'll rig piping and transfer water into the nose wheel bay to get the nose down. Like, oh God. Oh. Okay, so those are my best and worst. What movies that I leave out that you think should be on either one of those lists? And there are a lot of great movies out there I didn't mention. These are, if I had to pick one, and it's, I'm going to say the Blue Max, but by the thinnest of margins, and on any given day I may change my mind on that, but I mean, come on. They named it after me. What's not to love? You know, I've got a bunch of Model World War I aircraft. I should paint a couple of them up as Blue Max planes. I don't remember if I think there may have been some kit models of the Blue Max planes made back when the movie came out. Was it 68 or something? George Papard, James Mason. But just a great movie, in my humble opinion. And I mean, that Fowls that they made that George Papard spends most of the movie flying around in, I think that thing is still in private collection, may still be flying, as well as a couple of the Fokker D7s they made from scratch. And although I was told that they got the airfoil wrong on one of them because they're all made by different contractors, and that it actually doesn't fly that well. Actually, you could remake a movie like that, because with these companies that have been fabricating ground up reproductions of World War I aircraft, you could probably, because that movie Flyboys that they made, they used a lot of reproduction aircraft, that didn't fall on the best or worst list, because a lot of CGI, and they had Newports and DR-1s flying like X-Wings. But that wasn't a bad movie. It's a fun movie, but they used some 2/3 scale aircraft in the background, taxiing around, mostly as SE-5s, with a Lycoming engine sticking out the sides. It's probably being an airplane that you spot all that stuff. But I'd love to make a World War I flying movie. Good Lord knows there's plenty of great stories to tell. Well, guys, that's it for today. Have you ever made a kit model of a TV or movie aircraft? And if so, which one? And what movie did I leave off the list? Or, what movie should I take off the list? Guys, take care of yourselves. Hope you have a wonderful day. And as always, model on.